TV app and the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, on Open Forum, joining me is the Honorable Ali Ehsassy. Hello, sir. How are you doing today?
Not bad, Frank. Great to join you today. Congratulations with the Open Forum. By all accounts, it's doing very, very well. So it's a great pleasure to be with you today.
Well, it's only as great as its guests. And we've had two really great guests back to back. They were liberals, but we'll forgive them for that. I'm kidding, by the way. Well, you know what? I got a red microphone. Who am I to talk? But anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you. We live in a world today where immigration is a big issue, and I think it's great. Your background is I think a great. I guess the best way to put it is a marker in Canadian life. You were a young man. You left Persia. Depends. How do you want to refer to Iran? As Persia, Iran? Where do you?
I'm agnostic about it. Some people are very particular about it. I'm not. Some say Persia, some say Iran. So I'm easy as to where my origins are from.
The point being, though, you were a young child when you left there. Your father, mother.
Truth be told, I wasn't even born there, but at some point. When I was approximately 9 years old, along with my parents, returned there. But lo and behold, approximately 6 or 7 months after we returned, there was a revolution. So I was very, very young. The revolution did not leave me with many good memories. It was, insofar as I'm concerned, that was not a good turn of events. So did live there for a few years and attended Farsi school for 3 years, but then we left again.
And you also were in Geneva, Switzerland.
That's where I was born.
Exactly.
My father used to be a diplomat, so that's where I was initially born. And then my father's next mission was to New York City. So as a little kid, grew up in New York City. And then as I explained, arrived in Iran 6 or 7 months short of a revolution.
Now, you are, in essence, continuing the family business, except here in Canada.
Sure. No, my father was a diplomat. He was an elected official. So as you can imagine, I've always been interested in what's going on around the world. But at some point, 6 years ago, decided that perhaps I should throw my hat in, and thank goodness things did work out.
You can speak to a lot of issues of today. We have a lot of concerns as far as being inclusionary, Canada being inclusive, a prime minister that ensures that he leaves the impression that he's inclusive. And as one of the people, not that that's why you're here, but, as a person who has a heritage, my parents they came here as well. So I'm the son of an immigrant. And so I understand from my perspective, but we don't all understand everybody's perspective. So I'd like you to share yours as someone who immigrated to Canada and now making one of the great contributions that a person can make in our country, and that is, public service.
Absolutely. So by the time we arrived here, had been through some twists and turns, if you will. But by the time I arrived here, I was 15 years old. So I'm a latecomer, if you will. But as I often remind myself, when you come to a country, when you're a teenager, you really start appreciating what a great country this is. I had the opportunity to attend high school and then on to university. And as you can imagine, I always wanted to be engaged in things because that's the beautiful thing about our country. People arrive here, each person has different interests, but we all pursue those things that we find intriguing and interesting. And that really is so incredibly beautiful about our country.
Now, if I were to make a decision about voting for you or an upcoming opponent, what is it that you can tell me? And I want to ask this question in different ways. What are you, as an opportunity to be an elected official to the immigrant side? Because Toronto is very diverse, and I'm just wondering. I'm trying to ask this question in a way that I don't want to confuse you or seem aggressive, but I'd like to understand, how do you deal with the different cultures in the country? And as an immigrant, we know that there are factions of people who are resentful. How do you do that dance to make sure that in your own mind, because that's really all that matters, if you do your best, in your own mind, how do you make sure that all your constituents feel like they can come to their MP?
You've touched on a great point. I think for me, my top priority has always been to be as accessible as I possibly can, to be a good constituency MP, and for everyone to recognize full well if they do have issues or concerns, that the door of our constituency office is open, and that I am very much committed to reflecting the perspectives and the views of the various individuals who live in my riding of Willowdale. Now, as you can imagine, I'm very proud of my own heritage, but I have always made it known to everyone that irrespective of where people come, and as you can imagine, Willowdale is a riding in which many people were not born in this country, but came here from different corners of the world with their immense talents. And so it behooves us to make sure that everyone feels like they belong and that they can contribute and go as far as their talents will allow.
Yeah, we live in a hypersensitive world, a hyper politically sensitive world today. As you know, I don't have to be in politics to figure that out. It's everywhere. It's not like, you're involved in social media. You have basically everything there is to have in social media. How does that help you to get your point across and what you're trying to do? How do you treat social media?
So, as you rightly pointed out, social media, and I should say that before I got into public life and public service, I wasn't too familiar with social media. That's not something I was particularly good at. But we do all the various channels that are available to us through social media. But it's also, sending out newsletters, sending out emails to individuals, and making sure that if there is anyone who has opinions and passion or wants to get engaged, that opportunity is there. Because
I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. After all, the reason why some of us are drawn to public life is we recognize full well that there are several elements to it. First one is it's supposed to be a collective effort. That's what makes it so incredibly beautiful and rewarding. And the second element, of course, has to do with we get involved because we have a vision for the country. We have a sense as to what direction we want the country to move towards. So those elements obviously make you someone who likes to reach out to the best of your abilities and do your darndest to make sure that you're reflecting the opinion of people who live in your riding. Now, that at times can also be a challenge because one of the first lessons I actually did learn was that I learned that even though I have strong convictions of my own on a host of different issues, that my job is not to reflect my own personal preferences, but to try to ascertain to the best of my abilities what I would seem to believe the majority of people in my riding subscribe to.
That is the challenge, isn't it? To determine the pathways of your thought and your support for whatever. There is, the homework that you have to do. What kind of homework do you do? As far as educating yourself, other than the obvious, which is going into the community, how else do you bring yourself to understanding who your constituents are? Because there's a saying, if I knew what I know now, if I knew what I knew now, I would back then I wouldn't have done what I did. There's a learning curve, and as a politician, you came in 2015, so you've had 5 years, so going on 6 now. What have you learned, and how do you handle negotiating the new information, because you must be hit with new information?
Absolutely, you do. I should confess that before I got into public service myself, I remember in previous elections, I truly, honestly, very much enjoyed, door knocking for various candidates that I thought were people who had much to contribute to public life. I've always enjoyed that. It is incredible to have the opportunity to have conversations on people's doorsteps. So to the extent that I can, I really try to be out there, go to people, make it known that, as I said, I'm approachable and accessible. But I think one of the roles that is very, very important is a number of different issues arise. And when you're out there, your job, to the extent possible, is to put things in context, because individuals in our country and in my riding and in various communities around the country, they're busy doing a million things, juggling family, tending to their work. So a lot of times people really don't have time to put things in context. So I try to the best of my abilities to put it in context when those opportunities do present themselves.
It can't be easy. You obviously understand that there has to be, rather than a reflexive action, an intuitive reaction to whatever information you get. What are some of the things, for example, now we're in a really tough time now with COVID. I have an understanding that you, like myself, wonder why Canada isn't creating its own vaccine. Canada has a history of a great, history of invention, of thinking outside the box. Insulin is a creation of Dr. Banting, a great Canadian. Tell us a little bit about that. I understand you have some ideas and some people that you think should be supported in that end.
Absolutely. No, it's great that you do refer to the invention of insulin. As you know, we are now approaching the 100th anniversary of that, but that is something that should inspire us all, that we can be leaders in a number of different facets of science, and research, and things of that nature. But I should say, as with all countries, I think we came to the realization that on many, many fronts, we weren't ready, we weren't prepared. But what I have seen during this pandemic, I've seen the hardships. There's no doubt that people are very, very anxious and concerned. Businesses are going through a very difficult time, and that really does break one's heart. But I've also seen Canadian companies from every corner of this country come together. If you recall, as early as April, the Prime Minister and the minister that I serve, at the time it was Minister Baines, they recognized that we have to mobilize Canadian businesses to produce, for example, PPE domestically. So during the span of 4 or 5 months, we received inquiries from no less than 7,000 companies across this country who were willing to roll up their sleeves. They were willing to retool and scale up and produce all of the PPE that was necessary. So as a result of that, when this COVID first began, our supply of PPE was domestically manufactured in perhaps 1% of the overall PPE that we were using. As a result of all those incredible Canadian companies that proved to be incredibly innovative and impressive, we now are essentially at the threshold of producing 50% of the PPE that is consumed in this country. That's one incredible example to witness. Another one, as you can imagine, is to your point, we came to realize early on that it was important that we continue to invest in Canadian science and Canadian research, and that we develop biomanufacturing in this country. So we're not at the whim of other countries. So there has been some serious investments that have happened. Once those foundations were established, we have now, entered into a contract to make sure that by the end of this year, we are going to be producing our own vaccines.
And of course, many people think or believe, and even, the science warns us that it may not be another 100 years when this comes up. There needs to be a true analysis and understanding of the complexity of how these viruses can develop and how they're not gone. It's not something that just comes every 100 years. That was just something the way it worked out.
Absolutely. I mean, no one can speculate as to when the next big occurrence may occur. However, I think Canadians rightly expect their government to be prepared to make sure that we don't go through the same hardships that we have been through over the course of the past 10 months.
The difficulty of the lack of predictability. That speaks also to probably one of the biggest challenges of politicians. You're part of of holding the purse strings, the tax dollars. Hindsight is such a beautiful thing. We live in a world where we have to make quick decisions almost back to back. It's so difficult. So when you make the decisions that you're making as a politician, how do you protect yourself? And by protect yourself, I mean protect us, protect the citizens, that the purse strings are taking care of issues that you can't even see. Like, it's easy to say global warming's happening, but how do you decide how to deal with it today with the thought of what's going on in the future? Because sometimes we can react. There's some who say we react too quickly, and there are some that say we don't react quick enough. How do you personally deal with that thought process when it comes to the environment?
For sure. That's a great question, Frank. Obviously, before you arrive in Ottawa, there are a number of different issues that people in your riding care about. But the most interesting aspect of it is once you arrive there, you come to realize that MPs from every corner of this country have very different sense of what those priorities should be. There are a number of different things that we have to juggle as a country. So your job is, to the best of your abilities, to, pardon my language, but you have to pester and you have to push to make sure that those things that are important to your constituents do make it on the radar, do make it on the agenda, and that we're moving forward as a country. But it's not as easy as one would have initially thought, because there are so many different issues that a country has to deal with. And your job is to try to remain focused on those things that that matter to your constituent, and to really push those buttons as often as you can. It's not most people probably think Parliament is a deliberative process, but that's not necessarily how it works. You don't march into Parliament and they're like, oh, these are the 20 issues we're going to be discussing today. A lot of it is done on the margins, or trying to build relationships with people who subscribe to the same priorities as you do. but it's one of those jobs, and I have to say, it has been the greatest honor of my life to represent Willowdale. But you got to be on all the time to try to make sure that you're pushing through all those things that constituents care about.
I guess for myself, obviously I care about politics. I care about social issues. It's so easy, and we also do sports. And I'm just bringing this up because, as an example, the answers always seem so easy to us. The reality of making the decision, which you've lifted the curtain a little bit for us to understand, that you're telling us something that a lot of people don't understand. You can't receive without giving. I was in construction and I used to supervise a lot of people. And one of my favorite sayings to them was, a meeting is where you come to ask for what you want and hope that you walk away with what you need. How difficult is it to do that dance, to go in with what you want for your constituents and being able to leave the conversation, wherever that is, with what they need?
It's difficult. It's time consuming. Before getting into public life, I never would have thought that certain things take some time to get accomplished. But you come to realize that it's a slow process, but that shouldn't stop you from pushing on a daily basis, building those relationships that are important to make sure that people understand where you're coming from, and doing the advocacy that the people who elected you expect you to do. So it's not easy, but then truthfully, I always remind myself on a daily basis, no job is easy. Truthfully, every job has its complications, and that's what we have to do. In every context, we have to give it our all and make sure that we're responsive to what people elected us to do.
Yeah, we all know what we don't want to hear. We all know what we don't want to do, but we got to figure out what it is that we need to do and need to hear. Communication is very important in your position. How is it within the party? As a member of the Liberal Party, you made a decision. You made obviously an important decision. You decided to enter into politics under the Liberal banner. What made you decide, and what makes the Liberal Party speak to what you think needs to be done?
So the first thing for me personally has been that my sense has always been, having followed public life for many, many years before I jumped in, that the Liberal Party, the agenda and the priorities do change over time. It's not just a prescription that the party follows, year after year and decade after decade. So it does move around. And that movement very much reflects what the priorities and the needs of the country are. So in our case, when we were first running in 2015, to me, it seemed pretty obvious that there were certain issues that had been neglected for some time in our country. For example, infrastructure spending. At that particular point, it was estimated that we had a $180 billion deficit insofar as infrastructure spending across this country was concerned. But that was at the top of the list for our platform. So that made it very easy. And it's an issue that everyone in Willowdale certainly appreciates full well. Another thing that was at the top of our list was reforming the immigration system, making sure that we can attract the best and brightest from around the world. So that resonated very much within my riding. But all to say, I'm not a doctrinaire guy. I think that at any given juncture or any given year, those priorities change, and it's important that a government understands where we're falling behind and makes sure that they are focused on the long-term prospects of this country.
Yeah, it's the fluidity of what you do is it's extensive. And it's I guess the biggest part of the challenge. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to educate or discuss with your constituents that you're grateful that you did, and you know, a success story? What have you done that you've done that you feel, this communication was good, they came thinking about this, I turned them around, I feel good about that? Because really that's part of the one of the strengths that you have to have as a politician.
Absolutely. Returning to the point that I initially made, I think our number one priority is always to be good constituency MPs. So quite often you get people contacting your office. They don't know what they're entitled to. For example, it has occurred that a family didn't know that they, were entitled to child benefit. So those child benefits had accrued for several years, and then this family all of a sudden appreciates that, hey, I'm entitled to these things. So it is incredible when you get to assist a family that comes to your office, has some challenges, is not getting through to the bureaucracy, and trying to stick handle their demands and making sure that you get a response, or that you bring to their attention that there are things that can be done. That is truly the greatest thing about this job, just seeing the smiles, or knowing that after several months of pushing the envelope, that you got a positive response. It's just so incredibly gratifying to see that. But there's also very difficult times as well. Perhaps I should share with you that the van attack that happened in Toronto happened in my riding. So that was just so incredibly difficult to watch and to experience. Everyone in the riding was very much touched by that terrible tragedy, but really pulled together in such an incredibly beautiful way to be there for each other. Another one that was very difficult was the Ukrainian airline disaster. So I knew one of the people who was on that flight by virtue of the fact that I do speak Farsi. I've been in touch with many of those Canadian families that have been affected. So that was very difficult as well. So there were good days, there were bad days, but as I said, you just have to make sure that that you give it your all. This is a blessing. There's a short time that we will each be in public life, and it's important to give it your all. Make sure that you're moving the needle, if you will.
I don't wish to unpack that too much, or get into the weeds too much with that flight. It's enough to be said, and I guess the difficult part is, we, as a politician and as a human being, whenever a tragedy takes place, we always hope that we can learn to avoid that tragedy. But that tragedy was one that was easily avoided. That must be very tough for your community, the Farsi community, because it hit home so much. Like, it's very close to you. Sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes we are not sympathetic. Empathy doesn't enter into the equation. Your reaction was unavoidable in that case.
Absolutely. Of course, it really pulls on one's heartstrings. But I'm so incredibly happy that as a country, I think Canadians were outstanding during that incredibly difficult period. We had, premiers in every corner of this country coming out and being there for individuals that had been affected in each province. We had university professors who were just incredible. So I don't think there was a single person who could say, after having watched the media, which did such a beautiful job, and Canadians from every walk of life were truly, truly outstanding. Those are the moments where you come to realize we are so incredibly fortunate to live in this country. where everyone feels like they belong. And as Canadians, we look out for each other in difficult times, and we're there for each other. So as difficult as the van attack was, as difficult as the Ukrainian airline disaster was, it just gives you a whole new appreciation um, for what a beautiful people we really, really are.
Yeah, and you know, it's not to, I don't want to shine a happy light on what happened, but I think the silver lining has to be um, how it opened people's eyes to how those people in the plane weren't in one block in Toronto. They were across the country.
Absolutely. They were, you know, from every walk of life, some incredible researchers, lots of them enrolled at various universities, others, you know, being academics. I mean, it was just so difficult to go through that period and see all these beautiful individuals who were making a new life for themselves under difficult circumstances, succeeding in a big way, and then this tragedy hit.
That van attack, and I told you I'm politically, I'm activated, is what I'll say. And the van attack, the biggest thing that I drew from the van attack was that the words that this was possibly a man who was unhappy with being a man. When we have tragedies like this, and I speak to you directly about this, and I hope this isn't a hardball, but it really comes from my heart. It's a question where society is changing rapidly. And as it changes, it creates issues unintentionally. They're not intentional, but people have not necessarily the belief that they're behind, or they do have the belief that they're behind, or the sense that they're behind, but in reality, they don't. We live in an era, you just have to look to our neighbors to the south, where people come up with this idea in their head. How do you avoid the dissatisfaction, the unhappiness, the feeling of not belonging, or having belonged and now I don't belong anymore? In your position, you must get lots of calls, angry ones, I might add. I can imagine the angry calls that you get. How do we deal with that, in your opinion? How do we go moving forward to ensure that men are not unhappy like that man was, or people in general feel frustrated with the way things are? Where do we go from there in situations like that?
As you have rightly pointed out, these are really, really complex issues. And these are issues that they make you realize that there are no simple you know, prescriptions that you can come up with. In this particular case, you know, for example, one comes to realize how dangerous online hate can be. And, you know, there's that particular angle to it. There's also the angle of recognizing full well that there should be more money available for, you know, for mental assistance. So those resources are there. In addition to that, of course, there's the reality that, you know, we have to make sure that one of the great things that came out of that is when we all watched as that officer exercised so much restraint. So it's about making sure that those resources are there. We can respond in effective fashion, whether it's first responders such as the police that did an incredible job, or first responders who were responsible for tending to those who were injured. No challenge that we face is a simple one, but as a country, we have to make sure that all those various layers that have to be addressed are there, so we don't have similar tragedies.
We look at social media, you refer to social media, and that pretty much today we live in a world of social media that is being called out on its behavior, on how is it neutral or does it take a side? Is it politically driven? one just has to watch the news for a few minutes, and you'll get these diametrically opposed people speaking on the same subject, and they find themselves in total extremes. We do have a lot of extremes today. In Canada, we're kind of lucky, but our prime minister did pass a law. The Liberal Party passed a law that the Proud Boys are considered not only a hate group, but terrorists to boot. How far should we go there without infringing on our right to speak freely?
Sure. So with that, there are all sorts of tests because, as you rightly point out, it's about hitting the right balance. Again, nothing is simple. It's about having an approach, but making sure that those safeguards are also there. So as long as it doesn't, get into hate speech, that people can also speak their mind. So the reality is, with social media these days, it's important to not allow it to fuel differences, and that you don't just have echo chambers where people aren't talking to each other. So social media, like every other phenomenon, has certain good things about it, but it can also it's a double-edged sword. It's important to make sure that those bridges are built between people who rightfully have different ideas, but you don't want it to get into the turf of hate speech and things of that nature. But those are issues that it takes a lot of time to look into it and make sure that we hit the right balance.
Officially, MP Ehsassy, it's easy to make decisions. Unfortunately, sometimes, there's a saying, the road to hell is paved with good intention. We need to be careful, and people are, today, I think we're too busy with knee-jerk reactions. So it's very simple to do something just on a reaction basis. Do you think that's a good idea, or you understand what I'm saying? Can you, from your perspective, how do you see us reacting to not just events, but the way the internet operates? Regulation is something that, when it comes to speech, it draws a lot of attention.
Absolutely, as it should. That is fundamental, free speech, to who we are. And it's incumbent upon everyone to make sure that we do it in a responsible fashion, and we don't infringe on a right irreparably. However, that having been said, I think one of the things that we all have to appreciate is that populism has very much been in the ascendancy. It's on the rise everywhere you look. We can come up with different definitions as to what populism is, and we see it everywhere. But populism is about scapegoating. It's about coming up with easy solutions to complex issues. So our job is, to try to ignore populism and try to come up with sophisticated means which make sure that we hit the right balance.
Remember what I said before? It's going to a meeting for what you want and getting what you need.
I remember that one. That's a very good one. I'd never heard
of it. It's one that I lived and died on that one. It's how I made a living, because basically, you have your mantra. We all have our focus point, right? Our North Pole, our North Star, where we get drawn. And no matter, all you can hope for, and I'm sure you feel this way about some of your opponents, some of the members on the other side, the MPs on the other side. Working together is not that bad a deal. We don't have to automatically not work together. That ultimately is the biggest tragedy that we can create, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think most people will tell you, as a general rule, that things have really become a whole lot more partisan in the course of the past 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And that can't be a good thing for any of us. Our institutions are built on a foundation of compromise and give and take. So that's something we should all be aware of, and do our own personal best to make sure that we're bridging those differences. And if people have different priorities, that's fine. We should recognize that we're a vast country, and those priorities will be different. And never treat people across the aisle as enemies, but just as people who have a different perspective. I truly do believe that most people would agree. I'm not a I'm not a particularly difficult person, and I appreciate that we each come at this with very different antennas, with very different priorities. But at the end of the day, we should compromise and try to listen to each other and talk to each
other. Listen and understand cause and effect. We live in a society today that it seems more and more is more interested in acquiring likes as opposed to speaking the truth and making sense and thinking of what's best without worrying about how much people like what you're saying.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, sloganeering and taking jabs at people all the time is not where it's at. Sure, it might be very helpful if you do those things and you're on social media. Yeah, maybe you'll get more followers, but at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself, and you have to make sure you're not part of the problem, that you are conducting yourself with the highest integrity possible.
The antithesis of that, as far as populism is concerned, is scapegoating. You referred to it, blame, and the reason it's effective is because if I get fired and I don't have a job and my life is not a good one, it's very easy to hear somebody and take to heart when somebody says, "You know whose fault it is?"
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to point fingers. It really is.
Yeah, it's difficult to say the best. Well, tell us a little bit. We don't have a lot of time left. Tell us a little bit of what your goals are in your position. What are we looking at from your perspective, MP Ehsassy? What is he looking at? What is he working on? What can you tell us that we can start learning and maybe help you to get what we need?
So I think the most important thing that we have all learned from COVID is there were certain blind spots we did have as a country, and that we have to remain focused on several things. The first one, of course, is long-term care. That tragedy is something that has been difficult on so many families. So that's a very obvious thing that we should be very much focused on, and make sure that those terrible things don't happen again. There's that, but there's also the appreciation that we should be supporting the life sciences and research and all those types of things in this country, because we are incredibly capable and resourceful people. So if we create those conditions, we can lead the world. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, I think that has become quite plain for most of us, is making sure that those supply chains are there, that they are not impeded by all sorts of different challenges, that those supply chains are durable. So there's a lot of work that remains ahead, but I have no doubt that as a country, we have seen many challenges in the past, but we've pulled through, and we've learned lessons, and I have no doubt that the same will serve true this time around.
I would regret if I didn't mention this. Our first responders, which, before this happened, the list of first responders was short, and basically the love of first responders, again, out of a horrible event, 9/11, we began to appreciate we always have appreciated our police. We know that, they're the ones that are mostly in harm's way. But also, we've got the rest of the first responders, the people that pick you up to bring you to the hospital, the emergency department. Then you've got right down to the people that work in the cafeteria or the janitorial staff. And now, I would have never have thought before this happened that I'd be looking at the guy working in Costco as a hero. But we have that as well, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it. They have been our heroes throughout. It can't be easy. I'm sure that they are concerned about their own well-being, about the well-being of their relatives. But I hope we learn all the right lessons from the challenges and the difficulties we've gone through over the course of the past year. I hope we have new sensibilities that have been developed and nourished by all the challenges and all the greatness that we've seen as well by all people who were on the front lines, whether it was first responders, whether it was our healthcare professionals, whether it was people in the trucking industry. Everyone has tried their best to adjust and to pivot and to be there for each other. But it's one can only marvel when you look at the tremendous things that Canadians are doing in different walks of life.
And the difficulty for folks that are going through a really tough time. What do you say to them? People who have lost their jobs. We talk about people losing their jobs like they're just numbers. What kind of face can you put on the distress that people are feeling out there, and not to stay just on that subject? How do they hang on now with the hopes, and what light at the end of the tunnel do you see for them, for those people who can't work from home, for those people who need to go out and work but they're keeping their children home with them from school? What light is at the end of the tunnel for them, do you see from your perspective?
Well, in my opinion, the Prime Minister has made it known, when COVID hit, that as a government and as a country, he thinks he should be there for Canadians. And he often repeats, we will be there for Canadians. We'll be there as long as it takes. It's important to bear in mind that, yes, it's been very, very challenging, but we have to make sure that this is only short term. That despite these challenges and these hardships, that we act in a responsible fashion to make sure, to the best of our abilities, that we come out of this essentially roaring, and we can make sure that businesses that have been very, very hard hit can get back on their feet and continue contributing to us all. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, but I have, again, being a student of history, I have no doubt that as a people, as a country, we will get through this and come out the other end stronger than ever before.
I heard you quoted once as saying you prefer not to look back, but in this case, looking back may be important.
Absolutely, for sure. That's yes, you're absolutely right, because there were certain blind spots that were there. We weren't aware of the significance of various things, but and that's okay. All countries went through these challenges, but we have to learn from those and never make those very same mistakes.
Now, an important question: are you wearing shorts under that jacket?
No.
I'm sure you've seen a few things because we've.
I didn't miss a beat, eh? I did not miss a beat there. So
the Zoom world has brought some really interesting things. There's interesting memes out there now that judge that couldn't get the filter off.
The cat, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I wanted to end it on a happy note because we have enough reasons to be depressed and sad, and I think we spend too much time in our lives keen too much on the bad news. How do you maintain a sane life? You're a family man. You're another human being just like me. You have to keep going. Very quickly, I'll give you the last few seconds to talk to that issue.
Well, I think, you're inspired by so many, even though it's been very, very difficult. There's so many people to be inspired by, whether it's, as we were saying, the essential workers, the healthcare professionals, or just to give you something that I see all the time, grandchildren. Taking the time to make sure that they call their grandparents, that those grandparents don't feel isolated. So it's not easy, but we can look around us, and a lot of people, despite those hardships, are doing a tremendous job making sure that they're there for others. And that's a very good reminder to us all that we shouldn't focus on ourselves. We should be focused on others.
Absolutely. So how does your family handle the fact that you're in politics? I'll give you 30 seconds to throw. How does that negotiation, family life, what kind of challenges you have there? Is there a simple answer?
I think one of the greatest good fortunes that I have is my partner. She's always been very, very supportive. When I threw my hat into the ring in my particular riding, because we were rebuilding the Liberal Party, there were 4 different candidates, and that process went on for a year. But maybe my partner knows how crazy I am, but she was supportive through and through. Never said, "What are you getting yourself into? This does not make any sense." So I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm incredibly grateful because, as I said, politics is a collective effort. It takes so many incredibly awesome volunteers. And I'm so grateful for all the people who have been there for me, have helped me, have taught me, have guided me. The only part that sometimes does concern me is because you're there on account of so many other people, sometimes you feel guilty because you're thinking like, maybe I'm not working hard enough. But it has been a magnificent thing. And if I may, let me also share one last thing. The best thing about being in public life is we're no longer in silos once you go into public life. Prior to this, I was a lawyer. So, practicing law, you really are in a silo. You're just hanging out with individuals in your law firm. You don't have the time to have a sense as to all the amazing things that are going on around you. The best thing about this job is you develop a great appreciation for how our communities are wired, or you get to drop in on NGOs and organizations that are doing tremendous work. And being a nosy guy, I avail myself of those opportunities and go knocking on doors, and it really gives you a whole new perspective as to how our society functions, and the tremendous work that so many people are doing to make sure that we continue to be the best country in the world.
I give you the last word. He is the Honorable Ali Ehsassy, Member of Parliament for Willowdale in our Canadian federal government. Thank you, sir, for being on the program.
Thank you, Frank. It was a great pleasure. Please take good care of yourself. Be safe, and hope to see you soon.
Very good. I am Candid Frank Stanisci. This concludes another episode of Open Forum, seen live at 5 today. We had to reschedule. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca, Spanglish Sports World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you for watching, everyone. Until next time, you've been watching Open Forum on Spanglish